Policies, Library Science 501. Collection Development Policies. These are some of the questions that we have to ask ourselves in regards to a collection development policy. First, why? Why do we need one? Why are they useful? Are they up to date? Do they limit what we can do? Are they too specific? Are they too vague? If we examine collection development policies, we will see that some are very specific and others are very vague. And this is, I guess, I wouldn't say one is better than the other. Probably is made on purpose in accordance to what the mission and the vision of the library is. Normally, I will have an assignment on writing a policy. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But what I would like you to do is to go to your library, either public or academic, or to the school library, or search in the internet for collection development policies, and you will see different kinds of policies. Some are very specific, very detailed. Others are very general and vague. So we have a whole series of collection development policies, and it depends on each organization. We will see an example at the end of today's lecture of Clarion University Library Collection Development Policy. I think it's a very well written policy, and I think it's in the middle of the road. It's not too vague, it's not too specific. Sometimes if it's too specific, it can limit what can be done in terms of collection management and collection development. If it's too vague, then it doesn't tell exactly how are we going to carry out the function of selecting, acquiring new materials for the library, weeding, etc., etc., etc. So in my opinion, the policies have to have a middle of the road approach. You have to be specific enough so the librarian knows what he or she can do, but it has to be general enough so we can be more dynamic. Some the elements of collection development policies, and let me say something here. We are not going to see each of these elements in every collection development policy. So this is a general approach, and like I said, if you have the time, please, I would recommend for you to search in the internet for collection development policies and see how they differ from one another. But some of the elements they have an introduction, they have a mission, vision, and goals. They talk about the community being served. They have responsibility for collection development, who is responsible to do that function. Sometimes it may have an intellectual freedom statement. It talks about funding and allocation. Of course, selection policies, procedures, and priorities. Special collections. It talks about weeding, when and how is weeding performed, and under what criteria. It talks about gift and donations. Of course, cooperation and collaboration with other libraries and other library systems, and how complaints and challenges are handled by the library staff. In terms of the introduction tells us what the collection development policy is. What is the collection development policy, and what does it do? In terms of mission, vision, and goals, these questions are answered. How the library sees itself, what are the goals of the library, what is the library aiming at, how is the collection going to support the mission and the vision of the library. Community serve, who is the library serving? This is a very important question. Who are the patrons? That's also a very important question, because depending on the type of library, if it's public, academic, or school library, the library will have a different audience or different patrons of different communities. So that it is very important to be that should be stated in the policy. Who is responsible for collection development? Who is in charge? Who makes the selection decisions? What is the role of the community? And this, I think, in my opinion, this is one of the elements of the policy that has to be very specific. And it is in terms of, I have seen, because this is where you can get into a struggle with different members of the community, especially, for example, in academic libraries. I have pointed out before that in academic libraries we have faculty members, we have grad students, we have undergrad students, we have staff, we have administration, we have librarians, we have online students, etc. Face to face, we may have instructors. So being very specific on who is in charge, who makes the selection decision, and what is the role of community is very important when you have a complex community. Another important element that we may find in some library collection policies is the intellectual freedom statement. How is collection development protecting intellectual freedom and freedom to be informed? So access of freedom, and freedom to be informed. What about censorship and collection development and material selection? So we have to spell that out in our policy. Funding and allocation. What are the sources of revenue? How are the funds allocated and distributed? In terms of selection policies, procedures, and priorities, what collection does the library have? What collection do we have in this library? And how are we going to advance? And how are we going to manage those collections? Another very important question that has to be answered in the policy. What formats are part of the collection? Do we have electronic format? Do we have a printed format? Do we have both? In terms of collection, do we have, if it's a public library, are we going to have a video game collection? Are we going to have a movie or video collection? Are we going to have ebooks, etc., etc., etc.? So these are some of the things that have to be answered in the policy. What are the priorities? What is the priority of our library? Again, in terms of policies, we can see some that are very specific, that everything is spelled out, but then it becomes also a limitation if it's too specific. Or we can see some very general statement that don't tell us much about how are we going to carry out our collection management, or how we're going to carry out collection development. As we have seen before, it is very important that we have a working principle. I call the policy a working principle. This is how we're going to proceed in managing our collections. What about in terms of special collections? What special collections are in the library and how they are managed? Another important issue is weeding. What materials are discarded? Why are they discarded? How to dispose discarded material? What are we going to do with those materials? Are we going to sell them? Are we going to donate them? What are we going to do with the discarded materials? It's also a good idea to have that spelled in the library policy. In terms of gift and donations, and this is, believe me, this is very important. And if you are currently working on a library, or if you had work in a library, you will know how why is this so important. I remember, as I've been telling you, I work at LMU, that's Lincoln Memorial University Library in Tennessee, and I remember I was a reference librarian there, and it was in one of the sites. That university have like 4 or 5 different sites, so I was in one of the sites, and I receive, but many times, in many occasions, I was receiving donations, and of course, some of those donations were like old books that didn't have any any space in our shelf because they didn't have to do anything uh, uh, on our collection. They didn't have any space in our collection because they weren't on the subjects that we were teaching, that the university teaches. So we had to make that clear to to the people who were giving out those donations. Like say, I'm sorry, we cannot receive your donation because the materials that you are donating are not part of our vision or mission, and we don't have space for your uh, for your gifts. And some people, remember dealing with some people who were giving us this donation, didn't understand that. They think that the library should receive any material. Well, especially in academic libraries and in public libraries and school, in every type of library, this is not the case. Okay, so even to receive donations of books or other materials, we have to follow a procedure. We have to see if those materials are or will be part of our collection and why. Okay, it's not receiving any kind of material, so that must be spelled out. Then, of course, very important, collaboration and cooperation. Is the library sharing resources with other libraries? And how are those resources being shared? Another very important thing, and I think this is a key here too, is handling complaints and challenges. How are complaints received at the library? Who is going to address those complaints? How is the library going to react when we receive complaints? These are things that are very important in terms of collection development policies. Here, next, we have and of course you can go to here it's the URL, so you can go and visit Clarion's University Library Collection Development Policy. I think it's very well written. It's up to date. It's specific enough to tell you what to do, to spell out what to do, but it's also general enough to give the staff some leeway. So we have the introduction, we have a mission, we have the goals or objective of the library, we have the library's collections, we have the selection responsibility, who is going to select what. We have cooperative collection development resource sharing. That means cooperation and collaboration with other libraries. Selection guidelines in terms of books. What else we have here? Additional guidelines in selecting materials. Electronic resources. Give materials. This is what I was talking about. We have to have, in most of the cases, we have to have guidelines to see why and what kind of gift can we receive. Okay, because some materials are not relevant for the collection, so we don't have to receive them. In terms of collection, juvenile, young adult books, media, serials, special collections, and this selection are within. How do we get rid of all materials? As we can see, this is one example only of a policy. But again, if you have the time, please go and visit online different libraries, and please search for the collection development policies, and you will see how they differ one from one another. However, again, and let me go back here, most of the libraries will have the following elements: introduction, mission, vision and goals, community serve, responsibility for collection development, intellectual freedom statement, funding and allocation, selection policies, procedures and priorities, special collections, within gift and donations, cooperative relationship, and handling complaints and challenges.